to the whole church about things, and any other time than a Sunday morning. This is the best chance we get to grab as many people as we can. And so I'm going to do that for, I reckon, maybe 15 minutes. So your patience would be much appreciated. Then we can have some coffee and other things. Might be less, we'll see. Many of you, most of you will know that for a little while, well, since July, in fact, we've been talking about some proposed building works and a gift day that will take place in 2 weeks' time, the 29th of September here. We've shared a number of things, and we keep sharing bits more. And what I want to do for the next little while is two things, really. One, first of all, just share something of the heart behind what we're talking about. But then two, address some of the more practical things that either people have specifically asked or that have arisen as we've looked at these things some more. I want to say this morning, the why will always trump the what. The why will always trump the what. What we are doing is one thing, and there's a whole lot of practical things to work through. The why we are doing it is what really carries weight. Not entirely dissimilar from some of the prophetic things that Scott just shared, it's felt like something of what I would call a Genesis 12 season. Genesis 12, of course, is that time in Scripture where God says to Abraham, get your family, get your belongings, get your household, get your cattle, pack up and move out to a place that I will show you. He does not tell Abraham in that moment where they're going, what their destination is, how long it will take to get there, what it will look like, what they might need. He just says it's time to move. And it's felt something like a Genesis 12 season of this is something new. This is a time to just move to a place that he will show us, that he will unveil, he will bring us into. And Abraham responds with faith, with obedience, and doubtless a ton of unanswered questions. He packs everything up and begins to move. Last Sunday, if you were here, you will have heard Pastor Newton from Kenya speaking. And some of you will remember that story he shared about the Lord telling him to sow the maize in June. But if you're in that part of the world, you know that you only sow maize, I think it was March and maybe September. It was twice in a year. And the Lord, Newton was like, June? And he began to sow in faith and obedience, realizing I have a ton of unanswered questions. This doesn't feel right. There's a whole lot more information I would really like to know before we do anything here, but I'm doing it anyway because you said. And miraculously, as everyone kind of sneered at him and made jokes about him, in June, the rain came. Bible calls us to live by faith. I hope it's an encouragement to you this morning that as leaders, we want to lead by faith. We don't want to wait till all our ducks are in a row, there's every penny accounted for, because then you don't need faith. Because we've got it covered, Lord. It's all right. We shouldn't be living like that, and I don't think we should be leading like that. That doesn't mean we lead recklessly. That doesn't mean we do foolish things. But it does mean that we need to have this measure of faith in everything that we do and be obedient to what the Lord would say. So without a full, detailed blueprint of everything that the Lord wants to do in this house, we do believe in this season he is prompting us to take some steps to go through a door. You know, when Paul talks about the Lord setting before him an open door in 2 Corinthians 2, there are many who oppose me. He's given me an open door. The truth is, you never know what's on the other side of that door until you go through it. You don't know before it. What you do know is when you go through it, the Lord's there. And that's all that matters. And so we've got to overcome some fear of the unknown, some unanswered questions. We've got to take some steps of faith and trust that the Lord will lead us. Because that's what we as a leadership believe the Lord is saying. I've written down here something very similar to what Scott just said. A sense in which the Lord is saying, it's time. Now that can sound very cliche and very generic. As Scott was saying, it's a new season, it's a new day. And some of us could respond with, oh yeah, I've heard that chestnut 17 times in the last 20 years. The reality is it's scripturally true. And God, I think, is shifting in a way that only he knows how. And I think he's calling us to move forward. You'll know, because I've shared a number of times, that before we even moved to Taunton, the Lord spoke to us about this place being a hub, not just for Taunton, but for the Southwest. And that isn't just this building. That's what he wants to do with us as his people in this place. And so we sense something of a green light to go after a Spirit-inspired, faith-led vision, which is still unfolding and doesn't give us all of the information at the beginning. And that's something of what we're talking about when we say about this kind of building work. So some of the questions that have been raised and asked, thank you for those who have asked them. Thank you for the way in which you've raised them. Really appreciate it. Because we're all on the same team after the same end, after all. So one of the first questions was, can we see the plans? So in the foyer, on the board, we've put 2 architect drawings that you can check out at your leisure. We've also, I think Nathaniel got them on the screen. There we are. So I'm going to briefly, as I can, talk through them as clearly as I can with a large group of people. This is the downstairs plan. You may have seen tape on the floor as you came. Hopefully the tape on the floor is a help to try and envisage a little bit what is planned. There is a long strip of tape across the length of the floor from one side to the other. Under these proposed plans, that is the point to which the balcony, the new balcony, will be extended to come out to. So you can see the 2 big pillars, the tape that joins them. The balcony at the top there will come out that far. And there's 4 little squares right across that long piece of tape. Under these plans, that's where the pillars will be that uphold the end of that balcony. Just where Rafi is standing. Oh, Rafi, can you stand in that big box? No reason, just wanting you to do that. No, there is a reason. There is a reason, brother. Stay in the box. That is where, on these plans, a proposed lift will be installed. And then behind Rafi, where you can see a number of stripes on the floor, you can see Rafi's mom and Evelyn, there's Sandra. That is where the proposed staircase will rise from the double doors up to above where Conrad is-ish. So if you can see that on thank you, that's very helpful to see it on there. You can see it on the plans in more detail, but plans aren't always the easiest to read. Some of the labeling of this is not fixed in stone, it just helps us in the process. So where the sound desk is at now, that will be covered over with the roof of the balcony, and it may even, like many sound desks in many churches, be an enclosed room at some point. We can talk about how that works. At this point, there's a chair storage marked between the double doors and the sound desk. Doesn't have to be a chair storage, just marked that way at the moment. And on the other side where Rafi was stood, you can see where the platform lift and the staircase go. And then the second plan gives you an upstairs picture. Yeah, that's the one. Which at the moment, you've got things marked kitchen and cafe. Again, none of this is particularly definitive. Similarly, viewing area, and it says disabled viewing position. That's not meant to be fixed in stone. It's just how the plans are drawn so we can see them. So you can see that actually, very few of you have been up there, but we'll show you some pictures in a minute. That balcony space will not quite be doubled, but will be extended out so that there's lots more space up there. And you can see, some of you, a little door that's open actually on the left-hand side. Behind there is a thin galley room labeled kitchen at the moment, but it gives us options. So that is taped on the floor. You can look at the plans in the foyer. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense. A number of you have asked, please, will there be a lift? Some of you have asked, why on earth do we need a lift? And so we are in the position, certainly legally, under the Disability Discrimination Act, to be able to make provision for access. And so we built that into the plans. Our preferred option would be to do all of this building work at once. A lot of that is financially dependent, and so the lift can't come first, it will need to come second. If it's possible, it all comes together, but it might need a phase 2, depending on finance, to get the lift in. We've got actually the photographs, Nathaniel. Can we just see some of those photographs? So that is what it looks like up there, looking down here, up from the balcony. And then, thank you, Nathaniel. These are pictures up in the present balcony. That's what it looks like up there, folks. And the next one from the other side, and the next one in that little area marked kitchen. The next one. Right, this now takes us to the second floor above the creche room, which some of you didn't even know existed. But there are 2 floors above this creche room. The very top one is this space. I think there's another picture from the other corner, which is this lovely space in the arches. That's 2 up. In the middle is this room, which at the moment is very full of storage and other items too. The picture from the other side is a little bit better. You can see all kinds of things in there at the moment. And so there are the 2 spaces above this existing creche room. This staircase and lift gives us access not only into the balcony, but through the doorway, which is already cut out in the wall, into those 2 spaces. Does that make sense? One of the questions said, can you tell us a little bit more about those 2 rooms and this proposed youth hub? That's the language you've used before. This week, we're going to be circulating a video that Kelly is recording that tells us a little bit about those 2 rooms and its use. This will be in the context of a partnership between Oakwood and Taunton Youth for Christ, whereby a youth hub, I stress not a youth club, a youth hub, and you will see on the video the distinction is very clear and very definitive, that those 2 rooms will house. Folks, when you listen to Kelly speak, the stats and the stories of what's going on in our town with young people, your heart will break. And you will realize that even this is like the tip of the iceberg. But this is the heart, this is the why that matters so much beyond the what. Some of the vision statement already written for that says this is to be a safe haven that embraces young people with love for Jesus, empowers them to discover purpose and equip them with tools to overcome challenges and thrive, enable them to know life change through care, mentoring, support, developing life skills, breaking cycles faced by disadvantaged young people of poverty and adversity, and bring hope, love, and transformation. The only other thing for me to say today on that is this is not us giving space to Youth for Christ. This is a partnership between us, which means that as Oakwood, we will still have access to and use of these spaces for other things that we want to do. It's not a complete giving over of that space. So that's helpful to understand. Another question was, are we just going to end up renting out these spaces like some of the other spaces are used by people not Oakwood? Our heart is very much not that. Our heart behind, the why behind all of this is primarily mission and ministry. We want to make these spaces accessible and usable for the sake of preaching the gospel, extending the kingdom, reaching young people and old people, engaging with our community, not to simply give another organization, we don't know who, some space in a building. That is not our heart and not our intention. So hopefully that helps those thoughts. You'll have seen that the plan was marked cafe. As I said when we were looking through that plan, at this stage there is no definitive plan. We will have a cafe, it will be there. But having some kind of cafe is one of the proposals nearer the top of the list that would make most sense and feels like the right area we need to be moving into. And so while there's no definitive way of how it will look like and when it will be open, and there's been some suggestions that is that even the best space? Look at our foyer, look at other areas. So all of those things are things to continue talking about, and those things that continue to be aware of. Can you share the anticipated cost again? We said back in July a number of figures. I'll give you those again this morning. To get all of the plans that we just showed you, staircase, balcony extended, fit out, decor, electrics, everything, we are advised that that's going to be approximately £75,000. It's an additional 15 to 20 to get the lift in. So if you look at £100,000, and that will complete all that set of works, it's then an additional cost to go into these 2 rooms to get the youth hub up and running. The difference is that Youth for Christ have access to way more funding opportunities than as a church we do. And so as soon as that is accessible, that becomes a big help to us in terms of the partnership that we are forging with them. The other element, which comes in to cost and the maintenance issues. Great questions. Thank you for those who've asked them about, there are lots of things that need to happen in the building already, and that's going to take some money. What about those? Again, back in July, we said we anticipate at least £40,000 for a lot of the ongoing stuff that needs doing. Gutters and soffits, foremost. And much of that, the kind of stuff we don't get really excited about, but it really needs doing to maintain the integrity of what God has given us. So we got that sort of money, that sort of cost anticipated and more. Do we have that money already? The answer is no, we don't. In line with the AC UK policy, we hold about 3 months reserves. What that means, if you don't understand that, is that the running costs of this church and this ministry and everything, and people are employed by it, we hold at all times 3 months worth of that money, which in some respects is a contingency. Like if the boiler packs up on Christmas Day this year, then we can access that money to do that. But we need good stewardship says we need to keep those kinds of monies there at all times. That's what the Charity Commission requires in many ways. So that money isn't really, oh, we'll just borrow 20 grand to do some guttering, or we'll just borrow whatever to do this. It needs to stay there. It's accessible in emergency, but it's not just readily accessible to do a job. And so what we do want to say, and I want to put an underline on this, we're not diminishing the needs of the building that already exist. But we are at the same time seeking to step into mission and ministry and lead by faith. Last year, we had Tom with us for a year as an intern, which was great. He was great to have with us. He did so many things. It also came at a cost. The cost of that, we are now released from because he's finished his year's internship. And all of a sudden, we have finance that we can now begin to divert better to some of these maintenance works. Similarly, our plan is to ring-fence a significant proportion of the rental income that we get month by month for this building and devote that to these maintenance works that do need doing. So we kind of have these twin tracks of the stuff we have to do and how we're going to find money for that, but also we want to step forward in faith with mission and ministry in mind. How on earth are we going to get all this money? People are asking more questions, good questions. I'll repeat what I said back in July. Number one, we had a conviction the right thing to do was to come to the church family first and say, this is our heart, this is where we want to go. How might we give to this? And in 2 weeks' time, we have a gift day. And if you've watched Paul's video, you'll see that you could bring money on the day. You could fill in a pledge card on the day. You could set up a standing order for month by month ongoing. There's different ways to respond on the gift day. That, for us, is the right place to start. Secondly, there are grant possibilities out there that aren't so easy for churches because we do not want to be entangled with the world telling us the things we must and must not do. So we have to be very careful about that. Thirdly, we could enlarge the loan that we still have for the cost of this building when it was first bought. And we could extend that and get some money from there. And fourthly, particularly come the new year, we're going to have a whole bunch of fundraising activities and events, whether they be one-off events or sponsored things. We're going to gather a few people together to help this so that bit by bit, more can be raised. When are we going to do it? And how long is it going to take? Very good questions. Don't have very accurate answers. When will it begin? Well, that does depend a little bit on the financial response of the church and of the means beyond the church as to when we can actually do it. My passion, I'm probably speaking a bit out of line. Imagine if by halfway through next year it's done. That would be awesome. But it would be great if at some point through 2025 it was completed. It is going to take at least 3 months or so. And we are going to have to face disruption in the short term so that we can have a greater resource for what we believe the Lord is saying in the longer term. Parking, I've got 2 things left and then we're done. What about parking? There's already limited parking. How's this going to affect parking? Great question. It is an issue for us. I think 2 things to say. One, much of what we envisage happening in these spaces ought not add to the weightier pinch points that are already during the week. Sunday morning is a big pinch point. Lots of cars coming in. We fill the car park and the roads start to get filled. But we envisage a number of things happening here that aren't necessarily, of course, Sunday morning to add to the parking issues. We need to be mindful of how that works so that we don't overly add to the pinch points that are most problematic. We don't want to cause problems for our residents. Secondly, can our parking be extended and the capacity increased? There are options there. One or two have given some great suggestions about some reconfiguring thoughts around what we've got. There are other options about creating more space within our grounds for parking. All of those second ones do come at a cost. Everything comes at a cost, doesn't it? And so we've got to bear those in mind as to how much parking will that give us, and are there other options, maybe off-site, that we can do with the local schools even. Finally, I'm going to read this out because I think it's a brilliant question, one we all need to hear and ask. It's very exciting that you are proposing developments of the building for use with the community, and it fits with previous missional vision. How can we activate the church community to give their time to enable ongoing maintenance and use of the building? For there are lots of roles. We need more involved, not just the few. And I say, amen. We absolutely do. If it's 4 people running around, working so hard, trying to catch their tail to do bits and pieces, then that ain't going to help us. I think not just from a maintenance point of view, but let me emphasize this, from a ministry and service point of view. We want the church as wide as possible to engage in whatever it's able to do, to be part of what this means. And so as we go forward with some practical building things, we'll be pulling together some practical building people to help us with that, whether it be the new project or some maintenance things. But also as space becomes available and ministry and mission opportunities arise, our heart is for more people to be engaged in service and ministry as a team, as a gloriously one body with a ministry of reconciliation to one another and to the world beyond us. Can't overemphasize that enough. So in summary, vision, please see the why behind the what. Seeking to convey a measure of that today, because there are great opportunities. And I would urge us all, in prayer, to see mission and ministry more than bricks and mortar, and realize what this is really about. Secondly, faith. We want to live by faith. We want to lead by faith. We want to walk in faith. Not with reckless abandon, but with a sense of, when we hear the Lord prompt us, when we hear him speak, then let's take some steps. 3 as team, we need to be, as much as we can, doing whatever we can, serving, seeking to be part of, getting involved with, as we've really helpfully heard this morning. And fourthly, there is a measure of resilience here. It ain't going to be straightforward. It never is. No building project anyone has been part of is straightforward. Nothing anyone ever does in church life is straightforward. There is an enemy out there wanting to wreck everything. And there are challenges within that we don't want to give oxygen to. And so I would urge us all to be of one heart and mind. And let's discuss. And let's talk. And hopefully what I've been able to share this morning has answered some questions, has given more food for thought, has allayed some concerns. But as we've always said, if you have specific things you want to talk more about, then particularly Darrell and Paul and myself or any of the leaders, please, the door is open. Don't feel awkward. Don't think it's a silly question. We'd love to have more of those conversations with you. Okay, that's a little bit longer than 15, but thank you for that, and thank you for giving us that time this morning, and I pray that you have an awesome week, and I pray that the Lord bless you, even as you have some coffee and chat this morning. Amen. Thank you all. God bless you.